Hello, friends. Today is a very special episode of the podcast, and I wanted to take a moment to introduce it before the music starts. My dad's 86th birthday would have been just a few days ago, and to honor him, we actually recorded this episode back in October of 2019, knowing that we were going to wait 5 months to release it. But I wanted to introduce it because today we're in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, and travel, which is something we talk about in various forms on the podcast, is obviously temporarily on hold. But my hope is that this episode serves as a reminder that it is just that. It's temporary. As my dad and many other wise people have said before, this too shall pass. Before you know it, the world's going to get back to normal, the borders will open to travelers once more, and we're all going to have plenty of toilet paper. As a side note, I really recommend using a bidet. You'll never feel so fresh, and it solves 99% of your toilet paper problems. So, that said, have faith in the goodness in humanity because there's a lot of it, and much more of it than the media would lead you to believe. This is a tough time for the world, and having lost my father only a year and a half ago, I really do feel for all the people that are suffering loss right now and who are going to continue to do so long after Corona is gone away. I hope you enjoy this episode as a tribute to my dad. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. And thank you again for listening. With no further ado, welcome to the Memories of a Moonbird podcast, exploring life one story at a time. Hello, friends. Today on the show, he's a recently retired dentist who, for more than 3 decades, drilled and filled the mouths of the people around the Chicago area. He's traveled a fair amount in his life, something he says he's always loved. He's also that guy in the room with a great smile and a twinkle in the eye who really enjoys sharing a funny tale or two when friends and family are gathered around. He and my father not only shared a bond as fellow dentists who worked together back in the proverbial day, but they were the best of friends. They traveled together back in the 1980s on a couple of great adventures out west. Today, we're going to hear about some of those adventures, talk about the importance of traveling with friends, and share a few memories of this Moonbird's dad. Please welcome, phoning in from Chicago, our dear family friend, Dr. Kevin Baker.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's great to talk to you. So tell the fans out there where you're from.
I'm from central Illinois, a small town called Decatur, Illinois. I grew up there and went through high school. And then after high school, my family moved up to the Chicagoland area, and I've been here ever since.
Now, did you travel when you were growing up with your family?
Not particularly. No, my family didn't travel a lot. So really, my first trip was to Chicago from central Illinois. In those days, we took a train, actually. There were airplanes in those days, but they were like DC-3s, and I don't know if you're familiar with those, but they're old twin-engine planes that when you walked up the aisle in the plane, it was like at a 45-degree angle, and
Wow.
when they started the engines, flames shot out the engines.
Are you serious?
Oh no, quite serious. Yeah. It was rather intimidating. And I can always remember the stewardesses. Like if you flew in the summertime, just from Central Illinois to Chicago, there would just be sweat beaded up on their foreheads. I mean, because there was no air conditioner or anything like that. So and train tips, the same thing. I always loved riding trains and still do today. So that was really the.
Where was the first place outside of Chicago, or outside of Illinois, I should say, that you actually traveled?
Okay, that would be, I have had an uncle of mine who taught at a college in Kansas that I ended up going to in a town called Atchison, Kansas, and it's right on the Missouri River by St. Joe, Missouri, and that was really the first long-distance trip, which was probably about an 8-10 hour trip in those days by automobile, and that was the first trip at any distance, let's put it that way. Yeah.
Now, do you have a specific memory of when you discovered that you liked to travel?
You know, I think the train travel to Chicago was kind of luxurious in those days, and
Well, talk about that. What was that like, being on a train back then?
Well, it was everybody dressed up. there was nothing casual about it, and it was something to look forward to. And then my mom, like during the holiday season, at Christmas time, she would put us on the train, and we would all come up to. It used to be a store in Chicago called Marshall Field's. It was famous, and
The department store, yeah.
huge department store. It's a Macy's now. But they had a dining area there called the Walnut Room, and it had a very elaborate Christmas tree and decorations. And so she would bring us up for lunch at the Walnut Room. We would take the train.
And was this about 1958, 1962, somewhere around there?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, probably the early '60s, I would say. And the Walnut Room is still in existence today, and it's still very popular during the holidays. So they kept that tradition alive. But those were the first really real memories that I can remember. And sometimes in the summertime, I also remember we would take the train up, and the train would, for one reason or another, there'd be some sort of mechanical difficulty, and the train would have to pull over to the side. And in the Midwest, with the sun beating down in the summertime and the cornfields, it would get rather warm inside the train. So
I can only imagine, yeah.
I do remember those things before the luxuries that we have today. So,
Speaking of trains, Dad used to tell me a story about when he was about 10 years old, and he used to tell me how he would take a train from his place downtown, and he would get a popcorn and a soda and go watch all the war reels that were, so I guess maybe it was 1942. But he said the whole thing cost 15 cents.
Sure.
It's just crazy.
Yeah, when you think back in those days, the cost, they weren't weren't expensive at all by today's standards.
So now, I know you recently retired,
Mm-hmm.
and how long were you actually a practicing dentist?
I practiced for 43 years and retired, like I said, 2 years ago. So, 43 years.
And what made you decide to become a dentist in the first place?
Well, I've always been around teeth, as goofy as that might sound. I have an uncle who was an orthodontist, so he influenced me. I had a stepfather who had a dental laboratory in Decatur in Central Illinois for over 55 years, and so he influenced me also. So that's kind of how I went.
So over more than 40 years of drilling and filling and being in people's mouths, what was your favorite part of being a dentist?
Dealing with the people. No doubt. Sometimes the dentistry can be stressful, as a lot of jokes have been made about. But the people, and when I say people, I don't mean just the patients, but people you work with and whatnot. I have a lot of pleasant memories of the people.
Yeah, Dad said the same thing. And I over the years, of course, I got to meet a lot of his staff and the people, the other doctors he worked with, and they became family friends like yourself. And he would always talk about the one thing he loved about his patients were that in his later years as a dentist, he did welfare dentistry for all the lower income families in the west side of Cleveland, and he said it didn't really fill the wallet, but it filled the heart. That was his thing.
No, you're correct. I actually did that at the beginning of my career, and you're right. It was very rewarding. Because a lot of, and in this day and age, even today, there's a lot of need for dentistry out there, and there's a lot of places where those needs aren't being filled. Yeah, it was very rewarding.
So did you get to travel for dentistry, to continuing education classes?
You know what? Not particularly. I mean, on occasion, but the majority of my continuing education, they have a large. One of the biggest dental meetings every February is held at McCormick Place, a big convention center.
Is that from the McCormick Spice Company?
Good question. I believe it was the McCormicks from McCormick Reaper, the reaping machine for wheat and that, in the 1800s, if you're familiar with that at all.
Before my time, Kevin.
Okay. But I think that was probably because they were headquartered in Chicago. The McCormick family, were owners to the Chicago Tribune back in the early 1800s.
Wow.
And they were supposedly responsible for getting Abe Lincoln elected president.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, the news media in those days, they were king, and they were largely responsible for that. So, there's just a real history out this way. So that's why when you said McCormick, no, that was the spices, but there was a different McCormick.
So, do you like being retired?
I do, very much so. Yeah, it was time. I've always heard that. Well, when will you know when it's time to retire? And it just kind of it felt like the right time, to be honest with you. And no, so since I've been retired, no, I'm quite happy. I'm very happy, actually.
I'm slightly
So,
envious because I dream of retiring.
well, as most people do, I never really thought about it much until later in life. I always just thought, well, I'll just keep working until whenever, and
Well, yeah,
whenever
when I
finally.
say retire, people misunderstand. It's not that I want to sit on a chair and watch TV all day.
No.
I want to not have to work for a living. I just want to go create and have fun and enjoy the world, you know?
Well, it's funny you should say that because with your dad or myself, being dentists, our whole lives were schedules. They were always schedules, everyday schedules. And so now when I get up, I don't have any schedule. And it's like, it really is. It takes some getting used to because you're so programmed from your life to get up and go to work, come home and repeat the process. And now it's, you don't have to do that. And that's the kind of the freedom. And
I would call that glorious.
yeah, it is. It really, truly is.
So now I know you're approaching 70 here soon, right?
Hmm. Yes, I
So
am. Next
70
year.
years walking around planet Earth. Right now, what are you most passionate about?
Oh gosh, I again, we have a dog, and I've always my whole life loved dogs. And when I was younger, people would say, "What do you want to be?" There were three things I'd thought about being. And one was a veterinarian, one was a dentist, and one was an airline pilot. Because I wear glasses, the airline pilot was out, and because I was influenced by the relatives that were in the dental business, I was swayed that way. But I do love animals, and
Hmm.
we have a little Boston Terrier that's like our child, and I'm very passionate about dogs and pets and animals in general. So
That's awesome. I really respect that a great deal.
you know,
I know you've traveled a fair amount in your life. When you look back, what's been the most rewarding thing, do you think, about having a life where you've traveled?
again, I'm going to go back kind of along the lines of your dad. My response about dentistry. I do enjoy meeting people and seeing different walks of life or different ways of life or encountering people and different ways they earn a living. I've always been intrigued by that. And so, yeah, I do enjoy the experience of meeting people and places and, basically change of scenery, getting out of your element, your comfort zone. I do enjoy that a lot.
Well, let's talk about your trip in the 1980s. You guys went out west a couple of times. You
Hmm.
had
Yes, we did.
these big fun trips. What made you guys decide in the first place to take
It was
these?
it was purely spontaneous. It was I had a sister who lived at the time in Crested Butte, Colorado, which is a mountain town about 9,000 feet, 9,400 feet up in the air.
Hmm.
And I had been out to visit her a couple times. And so your dad and we talked about getting together and doing something. And I said, well, we could go out there and wander through the mountains. And so that was what it was. It was just purely spontaneous. And so, in other words, let's get in the car and wherever it takes us, that's where we end up. We had a tent, we got food along the way, and we just kind of winged it.
Well, and for people who may not realize, this is in the day before mobile phones and GPS and all that stuff. So once you stepped into a plane, communication with friends and family was pretty not non-existent unless you got to a hotel or a payphone, right?
That's absolutely right. A payphone was basically it. And when you're in the mountains, payphones are kind of few and far between. So, yeah, you were kind of cut off from your comfort zone and your loved ones. So, yeah,
I mean, it must have
it
been
really
great on some level to have that kind of freedom and
it was. Looking back now, yeah, because you can't have that now. And when you look back, it's I mean, it just right now a big smile crosses my face because of all the different stops that we made and just the different the different things that we did. It really was. It was a trip of a lifetime, truly. I mean, just great memories.
Now, did you guys get into any kind of mischief while you were out there?
Well, we would drive all day to get to where we were going, and then we would go and get something to eat, and then we'd find some water hole that we could get some rum and cokes, because both your dad and I like those drinks, and basically just take it all in.
So you guys weren't secretly arrested at a bar fight or
No,
anything?
no. There's no records anywhere to be dug out on us, so that's a good thing.
Or any
But
that you would admit to?
that's right. That's correct. But
And where, remind me of all the places you guys went?
well, on that particular trip, we flew into Denver, and then we rented a car, and we drove to Crested Butte, where my sister lived at the time, and we camped outside of Crested Butte. To this day, I've probably never seen so many stars in my life as sleeping out at that elevation allows, and there was no ambient light, so it just millions and millions of stars. And then from there, we went to Durango, and then we got on what was called the $1 Million Highway. I'm sorry, we went to Telluride first. And then between Telluride and Durango is this highway that's chiseled out of the mountainside called the $1 Million Highway. And it's a real white knuckle trip, basically, because there's only 2 lanes and there's no barriers on the outside lane. So if you go over, you go over. And so yeah, we did that. And then that night we camped in Durango. And then the next day we picked it up and we went to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and that's a unique town with a unique flavor to it. And we were there for 2 or 3 days in Santa Fe, and all the Western art and Indian art, and really neat place. And then from there we went to Taos, New Mexico, which is a very much smaller community with the Taos Pueblo, and but real history. And then from there we went to the Great Sand Dunes. We made a stop there, and then we went back into Denver, and then flew back out of Denver. So
That's an awesome trip.
It was. I'm gonna say, I don't know, 800, 1,000 miles probably in about a week's time, and those were hard miles, those mountain miles.
Yeah.
And yeah, it really was. It was special.
Did you guys plan ahead for hotels and stuff, or was this, because I know back in the day it was a lot easier to just roll into a town and get a hotel room?
That's exactly what we did. No, there was no planning whatsoever. It wasn't, that's what I mean. When I say spontaneous trip, no, we didn't sit down and discuss it or talk about it over the phone. Okay, we'll stop here this night and there that night. We just literally got in the car and went, and wherever it took us, like I said, it took us. And so it really was. No, so we'd drive as far as we felt we could, and then we'd start looking for a hotel. And if we saw something that looked like a possibility, then we'd pull over, and if they had if they had a room in the inn, then we'd take it. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really pretty cool, actually.
So where, of all the places you've been in your life, where would you say is the most fun or interesting place that you've been?
From a scenic standpoint, I mean, the mountains are magnificent. Well, my wife and I took a trip from Los Angeles to San Francisco along Highway 1, and went through Santa Barbara and by the Hearst Castle, and then up through Carmel, Monterey, and then into San Francisco, and then actually up into the wine country from there. And that was a pretty special trip, just from scenery and quaintness of the different towns that you went through.
I have to tell you, I'm going to insert another shameless plug about my podcast and say that there's an episode coming soon called An Unexpected Blizzard, which is a companion piece to a post I wrote on the website that's about a trip that Dad and I actually took. And we did the same drive from LA up to San Francisco on the one, stopped at Hearst Castle, did a Big Sur, all that stuff, and then we went over to Yosemite. It's a very special story, and so listeners, look forward to that.
Yeah, that trip. Yeah, that if you've never done that, that's right up there. I mean, just the scenery alone is well, it's breathtaking to say the least.
When you travel somewhere new, what's your favorite way to get acquainted with a new place? Do you go out for food? Do you go to a bookstore? Do you talk to people?
Yeah, oh sure, restaurants is a good place. Actually, just shopping in general. All the little bitty quaint shops and whatnot you could wander in and out of, and that basically is, I think, the easiest way. I like bookstores. I like tea shops. Anything like that you could kind of go one on one with people, and you ask them, okay, where's a good place to eat, or where's a good place that has some great scenery. That's probably the easiest. Although the one trip that your dad and I took to Las Vegas, and on that trip we went from Las Vegas to Zion to Bryce Canyon to Cedar Breaks and then back to Las Vegas. We found out about that again, totally spontaneous. A fella that worked in one of the casinos wrote it on a cocktail napkin, drew a map, and said, we said, well, we're kind of tired of Las Vegas. Is there any place we can go to, kind of get away from it all? And he took an ink pen on a cocktail napkin and drew the map, and that's how we made that trip.
Oh my God! So your cocktail napkin is modern day Pinterest.
That's correct. That is correct. That was our internet.
That is fantastic.
So, so yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously word of mouth and talking to locals. That's probably the best source I could think of.
So is there somewhere that you haven't traveled yet that you'd like to go?
Yeah, we've never been to England or Europe, and specifically in Europe, Italy. I would like to see those places.
Is there anything that you don't like about traveling?
I suppose security and the hassle of time or lack of time, and basically a day's lost going and coming kind of automatically today, whereas in the past it wasn't really like that. But that's the thing I really don't like about traveling today.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of long airplane rides, but I know they're necessary, and I just keep saying over and over again, we really need to invent the transporter.
Yes, yes.
I just want to step on a pad and be rematerialized in Paris. That would be amazing.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? I mean, yeah.
I'd happily pay the same price for the plane ticket just to be there in a matter of seconds.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But the other side of that coin is look what before planes, what it would take you to get cross country on a train, or even before trains would take you to get across country.
Yeah, a horse-drawn wagon. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So it's like, well, we have come a long way, but you're right. There's still a ways to go.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about, because you had the pure pleasure of traveling with your very dear friend, my dad, and going out west and having these adventures, and I'm sure with other people in your life. And I try to stress to people all the time that travel can be amazing in any combination. So it's great when it's solitary, it's great with a loved one, and it is certainly great with friends. And it's an experience, though, that I don't see enough people taking seriously these days, that they should just grab a friend, hop in the car, and go somewhere. It doesn't matter what the destination is. Just do something fun, but make these memories. And you and I have often talked about, at the end of your life or the later years, you look back and you go, wow, all that stuff that I thought was important, the phone bill, the deadlines, none of it matters.
No.
And
no.
That's what you said to me, and I've taken that to heart. And it's a big part of what I do, is realizing I want to learn from the perspective of people older than me. And if they're looking back and they're saying, hey, none of that stuff matters, what matters is these relationships with your friends and the memories you make together, then that's going to be the focus. I'm going to trust that experience, and I want to make that the focus of things.
Oh, without a doubt. When I look back now, and I can remember almost every trip that I ever took. Let's take, for example, the trip that your dad and I took, and one of them, the one to Colorado. I remember flying from Denver back to Chicago, and I thought to myself, now, we've got to do this more. I mean, and every trip I've ever taken, when the trip was over, I thought, no, you have to really make the effort to do this more often than you do. And then I go back to work, and before you know it, time's gone by, and you go, wait a minute, I should be doing this more than I do. And so, yeah, you really do have to kind of work at getting away from the responsibility of life and do what you enjoy, because these are the things I remember now looking back. Okay, I don't remember all the days at the office where things went wrong or went bad, but the really good things like this is what you remember. So yeah, that's really what kind of life is all about. But you really do kind of have to kind of work at it. I did, and probably still do, to be honest with you. So
Yeah, I think we live in a society that does, at least in America. I can't speak for other countries because I think some other places I've been are different. But in America, we very much live in a culture that says work hard, get the house, get the
yeah,
car, have the kids, do these things, get them all their toys,
yes,
get yourself this, get the
yes.
sports car. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think having a roof over your head and food on your table is important, but I'm much more like you that, hey, life is about living, not about material things, and don't let this society convince you otherwise, because you'll be robbed of these fundamental experiences that you'll look back and wish you had done.
Oh, absolutely. Because, like I said, that truly is the old adage: you don't take any of it with you. And again, where I'm at in life now, yeah, okay, you could have all the stuff you want, but you don't take any of it with you. And the other old adage is, for as you get older, is it seems like a lot of what you have is memories. And so, like I said, I'll sit here and just talking to you about your dad and these trips that we took. I mean, that's in a nutshell is what it's all about, I think. So yeah, the other stuff comes and goes, but with dear friends and family and loved ones, and that's, yeah, those memories. Yeah, just the other day, my wife and I were talking. We were talking about, again, that trip, and we stopped in Carmel, and we were talking about kind of really cool places we remembered. And I remember being in Carmel, and there was it was just a tiny little, like a country French bistro restaurant, open air kind of place. And you went in and had maybe sat 10 people, and they served you out of a pan. And oh my gosh, it was just spectacular. And it just, yeah, those are the things you remember.
Well, speaking of food, do you have a favorite food?
I love Italian food. I love Italian restaurants and Italian food. And
Well, Chicago has great Italian food.
yeah, it has phenomenal Italian food. And so yeah, I would say Italian food is at the top for me.
So, last meal on earth, you get to choose, magically and pure in front of you, whatever you want. What would you, specific dish or whatever would you have in front of you?
Oh gosh, I love chicken dishes. I love chicken. When I was in dental school, people say all you have to throw at Baker is either a cheeseburger or chicken, and and that's probably true today even. So I love Italian dishes that have some sort of chicken in it, and love pasta. I just love all that stuff.
I'm going to have to second your choice Jolene and I both love Italian food. I have a few other cuisines I love as well, like Greek, and I love French
Yes.
food, but Italian and pastas are in my top three. So that's
Yeah.
thumbs up.
Yeah, oh, without a doubt. You can't go wrong. That's how I see it. You just can't.
Well, it is
And
kind of hard to screw up pasta, really.
it
I mean,
really is. No, you're right. It really is. But especially the more traditional Italian restaurants, and boy, they've got that down to a science, is how they can come up with that food. Because oh my! But I also like I said, on trips you'll find all these quaint places. Like I said, whatever your taste are, you can find it no matter where you go.
I think traveling today, a substantial part of it is for the food. I mean, just it's amazing the stuff you can find out there.
No, it really is. I mean, yeah, it's never ending and ever evolving.
Yeah, the beauty of it is there's actually, I mean, I believe there are more choices out there of things to experience, taste, touch, feel, etc., than I will ever have time for. And I think
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I think you're absolutely correct. I think you're absolutely correct. Although I must say, and we've had this discussion before, you and I, your mom is one of the all-time best cooks. Okay,
I
when
agree.
she could cook something that I can't stand, that she'll make it and I'll love it. and she has that ability,
Well,
and
you will
so.
put a huge smile on her face when she hears this.
No,
That's
it's the truth. It's the truth. And Mary, my wife, said the same thing. She said, "Man, let me tell you, when those meals we used to have, oh my gosh, we would just be in awe of her." And
well, you'll
no,
be glad to know that she still cooks. She still cooks enough food for 26 people when there's only dinner for three. So
I remember those. I think I remember Mary telling me those grocery store trips where she'd have 2 and 3 baskets. She'd be pulling all at once,
you never
and
leave mom's without leftovers. It's great.
no. The food was just outstanding, outstanding.
So looking back on your whole life of travel, is there any lesson about traveling specifically that you wish you had known when you first started that you might tell someone today who's just starting out traveling?
I wish earlier on I'd have been more spontaneous than I was, because we used to early on, oh, let's plan this and this. And then once I found that I kind of enjoyed being more spontaneous than not, I probably have more fun, to be honest with you. And I know the old adage of planning a trip is half the fun, but there's some to spontaneity that I really enjoy. And
I actually agree. And I think where I fall on it, and I think you'll probably be the same, is that I think people mistake the planning portion for a regimented schedule. And that's never what I mean. When I say plan a trip, I say, okay, you're going to go to England for a week, do the research, figure out what's available, understand how the public transportation systems work so you can buy a tube pass ahead of time. If there's a museum you want to see, buy the pass ahead of time so you're not waiting in line. It's all about optimizing your time so that when you're walking around the city of London and you go, what's that? You can just go off and go do it and don't have to be stuck to well, we have to be at so and so at 4 o'clock. You're able to be spontaneous and enjoy this trip because you have actually done a little bit of pre-planning and research. That's kind of where I fall in it.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely correct. And then that also plays into, yeah, you can talk to some of the locals and find out, well, okay,
Mm-hmm.
where's a place that they would go that off the beaten path, I love stuff like that. And it's out there. You just kind of have to search it out.
Yeah, you and Mary ought to just hop in a car and say,
Oh,
heck with it,
sure,
pick a
absolutely.
destination and go.
Oh, absolutely. You could do that when you're retired. Just do a road trip. I mean,
Yeah.
like you say, just, hey, what do you want to do? You want to do it? Yeah,
I
sure, let's
mean,
do
go to
that.
Wisconsin and check out some
Sure.
cheeseries, that'd be great.
Yeah, right. Sure. Absolutely. You could do that. You could go to Michigan. You could, yeah, all these different things.
One thing I like to ask everybody is what's their whoopee? It's a reference to the movie Mr. Mom in the 1980s when Michael Keaton's son had a security blanket that he never wanted to get rid of. And so I say, what's your whoopee? What's your security blanket? Do you have an item that you always take with you when you travel that makes you feel good that you wouldn't want to travel without?
You know what? I do. And this is kind of a goofy thing, but in this digital age of digital, everything digital, I still like to wear a analog watch. Okay. It's just one of those things that I do. I've always liked that watch on my wrist. And so when I travel, now I've gone through a couple, 3 different watches over time, but I still like to pick up that analog watch and strap it to my wrist. And the whole trip, I'll wear that watch,
That's great.
so that I just look down. So that would be the one thing I do take every trip is that analog watch.
My brother Dale has a really cool passion for watches, actually, and he would second your whoopee.
I mean, I still like to look at the phone and find out the time too, but there's just something about that. It's just a traditional that takes you back, and I just have always liked watches too. So
Very cool. Well, the last thing we're going to do, I talked to friends and family and scoured the internet, and I came up with a list of 299 philosophical and life questions. You get to pick 2 numbers between 1 and 299, and I'm going to ask you 2 of these random questions on this list.
all right, let's do number 36 and number 72.
Okay, here we go. Drum roll. Number 36. Are you confrontational?
No, I am not. Okay. My nature, I think I'm a fairly friendly person. I am not confrontational. I kind of will try and work with the other person to see their point of view and then base my final judgment on that. No, I'm not. I didn't grow up in that kind of a setting. And well, I saw in our family, we had some family members that older family members that were more confrontational, and so maybe seeing that when I was younger influenced me not to be that way. So that would be my answer to that.
That's funny. I used to be extremely confrontational when I was younger, and the older I've gotten, the more I've become like dad, and I'm super just much more chill and laid back. And my mom always says, ask yourself, is it worth it for every
Now
situation you go
that's
into?
that's interesting because I've known you since you were 5 years old, and I didn't see you
Oh, you
in that
missed my whole
light.
angsty high
So
school
I
years.
must have yeah. Oh, that's true. That is true. No, you're right. You're right. That's yeah. That's interesting.
Well, it's funny too, because I always tell people that well, this goes off on another whole subject, but I tell people when you experience a substantial loss, like when dad died,
Yes.
I really do believe that you become the core attributes of who a person is become enhanced. So if you were a really good person growing up, or you were kind of a jerk, you're going to become an even nicer person, or you're going to become a bigger jerk. Is what I've experienced seeing loss in other people and in myself. And
That's true.
yeah, and
Yeah.
what's funny is when I was a kid, I was always very quiet, introspective, and I didn't necessarily need to be around a lot of people. And then the middle of part of my life kind of was more angsty and controversial, or I mean, excuse me, confrontational. And now that I'm getting older, and after losing dad and stuff, I'm becoming much more like I used to be. I'm pulled back a little bit. I don't need a bunch of people around. I'm just quiet, and I like to think
Yeah.
I'm a nice guy, you know.
I find that actually uh, tying in with where I'm at in life now, Danny. You're right. I don't need to socialize like I used to. I kind of I guess you'd say I've got more inner contentment than I ever have,
Hmm.
and I think part of that comes with just living life to this point like that. And yeah, it's like I say, life's too short. It's all too short to be caught up in all
It
that
really is.
emotional baggage and all that nonsense. No, it really is too short because before you know it, you're looking back and you're like, wait a minute.
What did I do with all those years?
Right. Why do I waste my time on all that stuff? Come on. So,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
So your other number, did you say 72?
Yep.
All right, here we go. Number 72. The last question for Kevin. What's the most exciting thing that's happened this past year?
Oh, golly. Oh, boy. I could say, okay, you're going to find this humorous. This goes under the head of what goes around comes around.
Okay, I can't wait to hear this.
I have had a lot of dental work on myself this last year, Danny. Okay. Okay, more than I've ever had previously in my life. Okay, so yeah, everything I worked on somebody doing now I'm having done on myself. So yeah, I didn't necessarily practice what I preached, and now it's all come home to roost. So yeah, to make a long story short, yeah, I've had some interesting dental appointments last year. So
God, that is fantastic.
yeah, but the advantage is I have some friends that work on me, and so that's it's a more enjoyable experience that way. I know them, they know me. So yeah, that was the first thing that came to mind when you said what's the most exciting thing.
Well, I'm glad that you consider dental work exciting. That's great.
I did it all those years, so yeah. But it is. I do find it rather ironic that my wife's always going, "You got another dental appointment?" It's like, yeah, I'm afraid I do. And
You know, it just occurred to me. I forgot to ask you about music. You're a big music lover, right?
yeah, we've always loved music, and Chicago's one of the things Chicago's known for is the blues, and so
Hmm.
we used to frequent a lot of blues bars in Chicago. So we do enjoy music. Now we don't go out to, well, a lot of the places are gone, of course, and but we still enjoy it even at home. So yeah, we do like music a lot, and mostly blues rock kind of music, and that's kind of what we grew up with.
That's so cool. So what about movies? Are you a Netflix person?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, very much so.
Well, what's one of your all-time favorite movies? Like, I think my favorite movie question to ask is if you're sitting home and it's cloudy out and you don't feel good and you just, you're bundled up on the couch and that movie comes on the TV and you're like, oh yeah, this is my comfort movie. What's that movie for you?
Well, as far as a comfort movie, oh gosh, let me think. Now, there was a movie I came across this afternoon. I don't know if you're familiar with this movie. It was from 1963. It was a British movie, and it was called The Haunting. Can't think of the author's name who wrote the book, but it is an excellent, because it, like so many of the movies from that era, it plays with your imagination. And I started watching that, Danny, and I could not stop watching that movie this afternoon. And it's called The Haunting. So if you ever get a chance, check it out. A black and white movie.
That sounds cool.
But getting back to your question as to a comfort movie, what about yourself? While I'm thinking, what's
The Princess Bride? That's easy.
Oh, I remember, I think we were at your house and your mom took Sammy, our son, and you, and dolled you guys up. Kind of a thematic thing for that movie. Watch that movie.
Oh my gosh, it's possible. I don't remember.
I'm pretty sure that was the case.
We did all kinds of really weird stuff like that.
What year was that movie out?
1987.
Okay.
Well, I was going to tell you, speaking of horror movies, if you want a great horror movie to watch, there's a movie that came out in 1981 called Ghost Story, and it's based on the famous book by Peter Straub, and it has an amazing cast. It's like Fred Astaire, Melvin Douglas, Douglas Fairbanks, John Houseman, Patricia Neal, Alice Kriege. It's this incredible cast, and it's a really great story. This scary movie.
Gosh, that sounds familiar.
Well, it's about these old men that get together and tell these scary stories, and then they flash back to their childhood, and this other set of great actors like Ken Olin and stuff play the younger versions of them.
Okay.
And then this mystery unfolds from their youth. And it's it's a very, very, very good movie. Great book, good movie.
I'll have to check that out then, because
Ghost Story, 1981. Look it up, people.
I will. No, that does sound. And like I said, I much prefer those type to the blood and guts in your face today.
Yeah, I totally agree, actually. I'm not a fan of horror movies at all, but I really do enjoy a good thriller, that captivates the mind and the imagination.
Yeah, absolutely. Where your imagination is like, wait a minute, what's around the corner here? And,
for sure.
What's happening? So,
Kevin, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm sure Dad is up there looking down and having a lot of smiles, and just thank you. Thank you for being here.
No, thank you for inviting me. It was my pleasure.
Well, the only thing left then is to have some chocolate in his honor. And as always, have a great day.
All right. Thank you, Danny.
If you'd like some more Moonbird in your life, and hey, who wouldn't? Head on over to memoriesofamoonbird.com or visit me on social media @memoriesofamoonbird.